The history of weapons includes examples born in the opulence of imperial armies, in the offices of great designers, in factories with thousands of employees and millions of dollars in budgets. But there are also those that emerged against all odds, against circumstances, against resources, against logic. Weapons created at a time when fate itself was pushing a nation to the wall. Weapons that had to exist, because without them, the very existence of the state would be at risk. One such example was the UZI, a submachine gun whose name is known today even to those who have never held a gun. It appears in films, news reports, and games, becoming a symbol of special forces, covert operations, and close combat. But few know that its birth is more than just the story of an engineer and a blueprint. It's the story of war, the story of isolation, the story of a country struggling to survive among enemies, armed only with the will, determination, and talent of a few individuals who understood that if they didn't create a new weapon, no one else would. To understand the origins of the UZI, we must travel back to the early 1950s to Israel, the birth of the state. It was a world where the army was still in its infancy, where soldiers carried dozens of different models of weapons, procured from anyone, anywhere, amidst a drastic shortage, where every weapon was worth its weight in gold and every rifle could decide the outcome of a battle. Israel in those years was like a mechanic trying to assemble a car from parts from 10 different machines, incompatible, outdated, and often faulty. The young country desperately needed weapons, but the world was too politicized for anyone to simply sell it modern weapons. Israel was forced to rely on what it could get on the black market, and later, on what it could create itself. And this is where the story of a man named UZI Gal begins. A young engineer who survived the horrors of the war in Europe and decided to dedicate his life to one idea: to create a weapon that would become a soldier's mainstay. A weapon as simple as a hammer, as reliable as a pickaxe. Unlike most 20th century weapons engineers, Gal didn't have a huge team or factory behind him. He worked almost alone, under constraints that are hard to imagine today. Scarce materials, a lack of specialized equipment, and minimal testing capabilities. But these very limitations became his advantage. Israel needed a weapon that could be produced quickly and inexpensively, one that could operate in the desert, in sand, mud, rain, and scorching sun. And Gal decided to create just such a weapon. When the first UZI prototypes fell into the hands of the military, they immediately realized they were dealing with something different. This was a weapon created not only by an engineer, but also by a soldier, a weapon that understood its user, a weapon whose every detail conveyed the logic of combat. The UZI was unusual in appearance, short, angular, even crude, but all its crudeness was the result of precise engineering. The massive bolt, the telescopic design, the magazine in the grip, all of this made the weapon incredibly compact and natural to use. It fired smoothly, reliably, and confidently. It could be disassembled in seconds, repaired right in the field, and cleaned of sand literally by hand. For the first time, a soldier in close combat could trust his weapon completely, without fear that it would jam at the crucial moment. But the UZI became a legend, not only because of its design. It became a symbol because it appeared in places where survival was impossible without a miracle. It became the weapon of people who could not lose. In this video, we delve into the history of its creation. We'll examine the circumstances that led to the birth of the UZI. We'll examine the technological solutions that made it unique, and we'll explore how it influenced wars, special operations, the film industry, and international politics. When you first look at the UZI, you get the impression that this weapon was born not in a design bureau, but on the battlefield. Its shape, rough, rectangular, without elegant lines, seems dictated not by aesthetics, but by the logic of survival. But behind this superficial simplicity lies an engineering revolution that has transformed the entire submachine gun category. In the late 1940s, Israel lacked a powerful weapons industry, resources, and time. A system was needed that could operate in conditions where many classic designs simply couldn't survive. Heat, sand, lack of regular maintenance, and sudden, close-quarters engagements. It was then that a young officer, UZI Gal, presented a design that was initially considered too radical. The military expected something similar to the familiar European submachine guns, but what they received was a design that broke the mold. The major breakthrough was the telescopic breech block, which covers the barrel. This solution allowed maintain normal barrel length, very important for bullet speed. At the same time, make the weapon much more compact than its competitors, achieve perfect balance and shift the center of mass forward, reduce the toss when shooting. Almost all modern submachine guns, from the MP5K to modern PDWs, use this layout thanks to the UZI. The receiver was entirely stamped simple, inexpensive, yet surprisingly strong. This was a truly mass-produced system, designed for production in the hundreds of thousands. The UZI tests became legendary. He was buried in the sand, covered with mud, drowned in water, thrown from a height of a meter, fired without cleaning after several hundred shots. And it kept working. Many soldiers claimed that the UZI didn't need cleaning, it just shoots mud. Of course, this is an exaggeration, but it accurately conveys the weapon's character. The reason for such durability is its minimalist kinematics. Firing from an open bolt reduced the risk of cartridge misfires, and the simple trigger mechanism virtually eliminated misfires. Technical specifications: caliber, 919 mm rate of fire, 650 rounds per minute. Muzzle velocity, 400 meters per second. Length with folded stock, only 470 millimeters weight, about 3.5 kilograms. Heavy, but very stable. This weight is a key factor. The UZI doesn't jump in your hands. The burst fires smoothly and predictably, shot after shot. This weapon can be controlled even with one hand, not in the movies, but in reality. UZI's genius is in the details. The magazine in the grip is intuitive, like inserting a magazine into a pistol at night, in the dust, without being seen. Dual safety system. Rear safety on the handle, plus flag safety, minimizing accidental discharge. The receiver is rectangular and wide to prevent sand from jamming the bolt. Open magazine well, easy to clean, difficult to damage. Every detail seems to have been made by a person who himself went through the war. The UZI saw its first serious combat in 1956, during the Sinai campaign. There, it proved its effectiveness in close combat, in trenches, buildings, and desert settlements. Soldiers appreciated the ability to quickly switch from single shots to short bursts without losing control. A few years later, UZI began to be purchased by Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Ethiopia, South Africa, and the USA for special forces. And that's just a small part of the list. The UZI became a symbol, a weapon used by parachute units, pilots, armored vehicle crews, bodyguards, and special operators. Evolution of mini-UZI and micro-UZI. When compactness was required, engineers went further. The mini-UZI is smaller, but still manageable. Its rate of fire has increased to 950 rounds per minute, but the balance remains intact. The micro-UZI is practically a pocket-sized beast. Its 1,200 rounds per minute rate of fire sounds like one continuous explosion. This variant became a favorite weapon of bodyguards, elite agents, and special forces in confined spaces. However, it required experience. The recoil was short and sharp, leaving no room for error. The UZI became the prototype for future PDWs. It demonstrated that close combat weapons should be compact, reliable, technologically advanced, and intuitive. Without UZI, many modern designs, from the MP7 to modern short-barreled AR platforms, would not exist. Over time, the UZI developed into a true brand. It became associated with Israeli intelligence agencies, bodyguards, paratroopers, and elite forces around the world. Its image migrated into films, TV series, and video games. In some action scenes of the 80s and 90s, the UZI became an almost obligatory accessory for heroes and villains, and this was no coincidence. Its silhouette was perfect for film, recognizable, rugged, and slightly brutal. But behind the exterior was a real reputation, the reputation of a weapon that never failed in the desert, the jungle, urban areas, or in the hands of a bodyguard protecting a high-ranking figure. However, like everything in the world of technology, the UZI couldn't remain at the forefront forever. Evolving military requirements, the need for more accurate weapons, the transition to a locked bolt, and the growing role of personal defense systems led to the emergence of new platforms. The MP5, MP7 and short-barreled versions of the AR-15 gradually displaced the UZI from some units. It increasingly became a tool for police, security, or reserve units, rather than frontline units. But surprisingly, the UZI hasn't completely disappeared, because in certain situations, it remains ideal, in tight spaces, for security missions, where the distance to the target is measured in meters, not tens of meters. Its simplicity and reliability remain relevant in situations where regular maintenance is not possible or where immediate action is needed. The UZI became more than a weapon. It became a cultural artifact of its time, the embodiment of the engineering philosophy of minimum parts, maximum reliability. This weapon was born not from an attempt to create a beautiful or fashionable model, but from the necessity of survival. And perhaps that is precisely why it has retained its significance for so long. Today, as modern systems continue to grow more complex, the UZI reminds us, sometimes the best weapon isn't the most modern, but the most reliable, one that can be thrown into the sand, picked up, shaken, and still work, one that doesn't require ideal conditions, one that can operate with a soldier who is tired, disoriented, and operating under stress. The UZI has survived almost every era of the Cold War and continues to serve in the 21st century. And this is the best proof that the engine of true engineering is not a fashion, but a necessity. Today, when you look at the UZI, you see more than just a square, stamped steel body. You see the history of a small country desperately fighting for its existence, the story of an engineer who, against all odds, created a weapon unlike any of its contemporaries, the story of soldiers, police officers, and agents who relied on this weapon time and again in moments when a single pull of the bolt could mean the difference. The UZI is more than just a chapter in firearms history. It's a reminder that genius is often born where there's no other choice. And as long as situations demand absolute reliability, the UZI will live on as a legend, as a tool, as a symbol of its time.